Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of, oh my gosh, of Conscious Conversations in Parenting. And we're doing episode 34, and we're talking about healthy boundaries. What are they, right? What are the boundaries that we choose in our home, in our household, and how do we set them, but also how do we maintain them is really important, right? And what is the intention of a boundary, really exploring and diving into that, because that can really change things when we have different intentions under our boundaries. So I'm looking forward to diving into this conversation, but welcome. I'm Angie. This is my channel, Journey to Soul. And I love having these conversations, these conscious conversations. I'm a parent to a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm really just a human that's trying to figure out this journey, right? We're all walking each other home, right? We're all walking each other up this path of higher consciousness. And so I believe that the way we do that, how do we walk each other home? We relate with one another. Yeah, we connect with one another. And so I think it's really, really valuable and really important as parents, especially those of us that have chosen this journey of being a parent, to connect with other parents and ask the questions and share our wisdom and share our stories and open ourselves to other perspectives. And that's what this is. That's what this is. And we love doing this and bringing this to you. So I'll let Julie introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Julie, and if you haven't been here before, I am a mother of two boys who are 11 and 13. So I've been thinking about so I'm so it and learn from one another, share our experiences, and just have some wonderful, loving, thought-provoking conversations. So thank you for having me, Angie. So Natalie, I'll let you take it over.
Thank you.
Or is oh, your Natalie's muted. I don't know if Natalie
she
is
might be
joining.
out. She might be out. So Natalie's out and about. And I'm turning off my video, guys, just so you know. I'm just doing it when the internet sort of cuts out to see if we can keep this smooth. This is life. We come up against problems here and there and challenges. And so I'm just turning off my video to do this. But I'm going to let Julie take this away to share her thoughts around healthy boundaries. She brought this topic to us. So please.
Absolutely. Yeah. So healthy boundaries are something that are vital to our wellness and our well-being. Now, in our home, we've had this conversation many times about where do we step in as a parent? Where do we allow the freedom for our children? And I think creating healthy boundaries is really the place to start. What boundaries do we want to create in our home? What are the intention of our boundaries? And that can give us a clearer picture of where we choose to step in and where we choose to step back and allow things to happen. So, for example, my intentions with boundaries in the home all start with our well-being. So, and I'm sure, many parents, that's where they start, they want well-being in their home. So my boundaries really focus on no harm to ourselves, each other, or our environment. That's when I'm going to step in and I'm going to say something, and there will be a consequence for those actions. Sometimes it's just the natural consequence. Sometimes it's a consequence that I give. But I'm very clear to my children where the boundary is. I always say clear, consistent consequences. So if I have a boundary, I'm going to be clear that this is a boundary with them. I'm going to be consistent with reminding them of the boundary and also having a consequence for that boundary, because it makes it easier for everyone to understand. And it's not like I'm just coming out of the blue and punishing them. I've set this boundary, and maintaining it is being clear and consistent with that as well. So no harm is definitely one that I maintain for the home. And I'm also, as we all are, an energetic being. So the energy of my home is something I hold very sacred. So a lot of the energy that comes in from electronics and media really is my boundary, where I say I am not going to allow this energy to overtake my home. So if it starts to feel overwhelming, and a lot of the time it appears as bickering, as disrespect, as really forgetting how to communicate in a healthy, loving, respectful way with one another. If we just turn on any children's television show, if we turn on almost any show, there is bickering, there is name calling, there is constant struggle and a constant battle, it seems like, between everyone. There's not a lot of shows that I see that come in without having to really search for them, that are very peaceful and loving and respectful, show healthy communication. And this is bringing up something for me. I remember my children watching Paw Patrol when they were very young, and I loved that show. It was all positive. It was about helpful, and there was just always, wonderful things in the show. I didn't see the bickering. I didn't see all of that. Well, my children got a bit older, so we didn't watch it for a while. And then I turned it on for some children I was watching, and all of a sudden now there is a villain. And, now they're fighting and they're arguing with each other. And I'm like, oh, why did they ruin this show too? So that was a boundary. I said, okay, no more of this show. My children didn't watch My Little Pony very much growing up, but seeing that show when I had other children over, I stopped it. I said, nope, we're not watching this anymore, because there was so much just bickering with one another, insulting one another, just being rude and disrespectful. So in saying all that, and I mean, in any shows, as we get older, it's the same thing. There's always got to be a conflict. So in saying that, I'm not saying I cut it. It seems like it overtakes our personalities. I'll notice it in my children. They start to behave in similar ways. I'm like, whoa, we're getting too much information coming into our head. It's time to stop that and remember how to behave in the real world in a loving and respectful way. So we need time now to output. We need time to just stop overwhelming ourselves with information. So that's a really big boundary I have in my house, and it's very clear to everyone in my house. And I set and maintain this boundary. And, there are times, like I said, that I'm not as consistent with it. I'm like, okay, let's let it go and let's see how it goes, and then I will notice these behaviors again with the constant bickering back and forth. And I'm like, whoa, time to shut it down again. And that's the consequence. We have to turn it off.
And
so those are.
I like what you're saying about the input. Like, you're seeing that, okay, there's too much inputting happening here.
Yes.
That's the programming, right? It's inputting. And then the output is that we are love. We are actually love, right? And we do a lot of work. And I know as conscious parents, we try very hard to align ourselves back to who we are, and we try to guide our children back to who they are, right? And that's like, so I love this idea of like, there's too much inputting, that it's overwhelming, that it's starting to program over top of what we are, which is love. And so
yes,
we need to bring our focus back to the output. And when we put our focus on what our natural output is, our natural output is love.
yes.
And so isn't that a really interesting marker to see, okay, too much is inputting. The love isn't able to come out right now because it's been covered. And I think it's really important to talk about, we live in a world where this is our reality. We have these things. And so it's not about cutting it out completely. Something I was taught was ego boundary. And I really understood, like, ego boundary, the ego wants to say, oh, that's it, all or nothing, cut it off. That's what the ego wants to do. And the loving, the loving soul, like our higher wisdom, is that none of it is wrong. We're just learning to master our energy in it all. Right. And so that's where
Yes.
the lesson is. Like if you're just cutting it off, that is more of an ego boundary. That intention is coming from ego. Like, I don't want to deal with it, just stop it, right? But then we're denying our children the full experience of life, right?
Yeah.
And the polarities of life. And so I think it's so,
Oh,
I love the way you phrased it.
I love the way, I was just going to say, I love the way you're explaining all that. It's perfect about the input and the output and about the extremes of just saying, nope, it's all done. We don't do this anymore. And that is not
Doesn't
a
serve.
healthy balance. No, we need to find balance in everything. And as you're saying, we need to learn how to master our own energy in these situations. It's not about cutting it out completely. And I think that's something that comes up in my home a lot, not with those specific words of mastering our energy, but in words that my children understand more. And I explained to them, okay, you guys are forgetting how to behave in a respectful, loving, it's time to shut it down so we can remember how to behave in the real world again. Those are the words that I use.
I use those words because of you.
Does become, oh, do you?
Yes,
Wonderful.
because
Yeah,
I've
because
watched you say that to Leah. I've watched you say, when you give your consequence, I love the way you do it. Like I've modeled a lot of it from you. And I love the way you say, do you need a couple of minutes to remember how to communicate lovingly?
yes, yeah, because that's the goal, really, right? Remembering, yeah, because we are love, and that is our natural state. But as you mentioned, we forget, we're so programmed, and there's so much information coming in all the time, and as humans we can only perceive so much information that is around us, right? So if we are constantly being bombarded with this bickering, conflict, negativity, challenge that is so dominant in the media information that's trying to come into our heads, or even the school system that's trying to come into our heads, then we forget. It's like we forget we're being programmed like this. We believe this is who we are. We believe this is the way we behave in the world. This is the way we're supposed to behave in the world. But it doesn't take that long after shutting it down to remember who we are.
Go back to remembering who we are.
Yes, but it takes that. And I mean, that's the point of meditation as well, right? Like shutting out all of the information that's coming in and sitting within ourselves. Yeah, and allowing our higher selves, ourselves, to speak to ourselves about who we are, and then our support, the divine and our angels, our guides, the animal spirits, allowing all of that to come through and speak to us rather than the programming that is often so,
it's not for our highest
depressing.
good. Yeah, it's not for our highest good.
Depleting. Yeah. No, it's not. It's really meant to deplete us and to get us to a state where we are easily controlled and manipulated, right? And it's often, through the ages, it's been vilified to go within and to connect with our own selves, because that's where our personal power is, right? And those who desire to control us do not want us to get in touch with our personal power. So, I mean, with boundaries in the home, I think that is an extremely important lesson. That's something I hold very sacred, that we need to have time to sit with ourselves and be with ourselves. And I think a lot of it too is the distraction, right? The distraction of the constant information coming in. So when I notice that my children are becoming argumentative, or name calling or bickering, like everything is an argument between them, I always say bickering, I'm realizing that there's something within them that is being challenged, right? And it's time for them now to sit with that, to understand, okay, what is challenging me here? Why do I feel the need to be controversial right now?
Project. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's another thing that I say to them as well. Like, there's something going on. It's time to sit with that, really. Stop the distractions, stop the information coming in. And when these feelings come up, it's important to understand what they're trying to tell us, why we're feeling this way. And if we want to change this feeling within us, what actions can we take? What new perceptions can we have of this situation? And something that comes up very often is we cannot change the other person. If the other person is constantly bugging us, we are unable to change them. We can only sit with ourselves and see how we can change our own thoughts, perspectives, and actions in the situation. And if we're constantly being bombarded with information, we don't have the time to sit with that. And that's the process of processing our emotions in a healthy way and in a no harm way. That's another big thing in my home, right? So if, like, we grew up not understanding how to process our emotions in a healthy way, we often distracted from them and pushed them down. And then we experienced the consequences of that, them blowing up in our life. Like, for me, for example, I would cry at almost anything. Like, I was called, waterworks, and, because I would just be sitting there and all of a sudden, tears start coming out, and it's like, what is going on? Or I would explode in rage and anger. And that was all that unprocessed stuff that had been pushed away and distracted from. So I'm really trying to set the boundary in my home that we need to process these as they come up. So we're not bombarded with, a huge mountain that we need to deal with and go through.
I really appreciate this, and you know that I'm going through a lot of this, and people in my household don't want to don't process. They are in constant distraction, especially my husband, constant distraction, right? And so this is just helping me see how I can begin to set a boundary, because the thing is, my boundary is very ego centered when it comes to it, and I just get angry, and so I'm really seeing myself reflected in what you're talking about. And so, and I think a lot of households can understand that, right? Can relate with that. um and that's a really great way to start. Even, like, I'm starting to explore myself. So any of you watching, if this is boundaries feels like an issue for you in your household, it is for me. It is for me. And I struggle with boundaries. I struggle with boundaries because I feel like we shouldn't need to have them, and I get angry that we even have to have them, but we do because of what the world we live in, right? And so we will get to a place, I believe this, that we will get to a place where we won't need to do that, because who we are at our nature, at our core, you wouldn't need to protect yourself from that, right? But everybody's there. We're still collectively rising to that, right? And so I'm seeing, okay, this is one way we can guide our children in this. Is just like, it's a loving boundary. It's a boundary saying, okay, there's something going on. You're projecting out right now, right? And you're right. We have this conversation a lot. You can't control what your sister is doing. Even if she's doing it over and over again, I can give you tools, like you can communicate, you can say how, when you do this, I feel this, you can say those things, but you cannot actually control what they are doing and what they choose to do. And so, yes, in order for it to change, they need to learn to make another choice for themselves. But you're right, in the constant distraction, they can't find that. They won't find that.
Right.
And so a beautiful way of setting those boundaries is like, okay, we need this time. And this is something we've done in our household. Electronics are pretty big in our household. I have a hard time taking it away from the kids because their dad is constantly on it. And that's really hard. Like, and so I'm still working through that myself, guys, right? But what we have done is, I have noticed that if they're on electronics before bedtime and then it's time for bed, they get all up in arms because they're in the middle of playing a game and whatever, and you know what I mean? And then you're just like, come in. It feels like an ego boundary. It's like harsh. It's like, okay, that's it. It's bedtime. They've not been thinking about bedtime. They've just been taking in this game they're playing, right? And so what we said was, okay, after a few times of taking electronics away and battling and power struggle with my children, I was like, okay, the the electronics are becoming an issue for bedtime, and bedtime is something that's honoring your body, you know, and honoring your wellness. Leah, especially, I'm thinking of when I say this, you know, she has a hard time getting up. She needs her sleep. She knows that. And if she gets her sleep, so I've had this conversation with her and I've said, okay, so there's going to be a new boundary, and electronics for all of us, even the adults, is going to be done an hour before your bedtime. And so I don't care what's going on, it's going to be done an hour before your bedtime. And so there's no surprises, and you have an hour to work out your feelings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the other thing I noticed was they would get off the electronics and then they would want to play because they've been in here all this time.
Yes.
And now they're out here and they're like, oh, there's so many things to do. And me and Alice
Mm-hmm.
can play and we can play games. So they want to play. And that's also not conducive to bedtime, right? So it's like, okay, now you have this hour and we're off too. So now they have our attention. And so we play games and we do things in that hour, you know? And it's gone really well. It's gone really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get to sleep now and there's no big fighting anymore at bedtime. There still is a little bit, but we're learning. So I just
Yeah.
really
Oh, I
appreciate the
love that
conversation.
yeah. I love that you brought that up. I've definitely set that boundary in my house before, and it slips,
Mhm.
and then it comes back and it slips. And I mean, it's all
It's
a learning
okay.
experience. Exactly. There's no right or wrong, but
Yeah.
we remember again, right? So it's like, okay, we can let this go right now. It's a different day. And then we
Yes.
remember,
Different things
oh
happen
yeah,
every day too. That's the other thing. Different things happen every day. Sometimes we
exactly.
forget to remind them to get off.
Yes,
And so then we'll
exactly.
see, yesterday this happened. They were like, you know, they had been doing something else. They were playing and then they don't know what time it is. You know what I mean? They're not thinking it's an hour before
Is
bedtime.
that booster just empty?
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
really?
Can you put the cap back on though? For the
Natalie,
lid?
I don't know if you could
Hi,
hear, but you're
Natalie. We can hear
unmuted.
Oh,
you.
hi, sorry.
That's okay.
That was
We're
so
done
funny.
shopping. And I'm just gonna jump in quick before I get on the highway. I loved how you guys brought up the ego boundary,
Mhm.
comparing that to like our true, like the boundary of our true self, like our heart's boundary, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes it can be difficult
Yeah.
um, to differentiate between the two, right? So I mean, if it feels uncomfortable, or if you're feeling angry, or upset in any way, that's definitely an ego boundary. Because when we feel those lower emotions, like when it feels uncomfortable, um or we're really upset, that's a sign to us that we're not responding to the event in the best way possible for like the greater good of all, right?
A great point.
Absolutely.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up because yeah, it can be confusing, like where am I setting a healthy boundary from a loving place, or am I just trying to control the situation? That's something
Yes.
we've talked about a lot. So I love that you bring that up. It's if we go back to our feelings and how it feels, and the intentions of it, then we can really clarify that for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's the source. I love that you said this, Natalie. I believe that's the source of people's frustration with boundaries, about learning boundaries, because I think we go directly when we learn a new spiritual concept, when we learn a new growth point, right? The ego wants to get involved. And it wants to, because the ego doesn't want
Like,
you to
whoa, are you
change.
killing me
Well, what are
here?
you
What's going
doing? What are
on?
you doing? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I don't
so
want to
okay,
change.
boundaries. We're doing boundaries. Okay, I'll tell you how to do the boundaries. And then we get confused because we're trying to apply what we're learning, and then we apply it with the ego, and then we don't get the results that they tell you should get. And so,
Mhm.
do you know what I mean? And then we're like, oh my God, I'm doing it wrong. I don't know how to do boundaries. And then we create a story. The ego has now created a story for us that I'm actually bad at boundaries.
Right.
So now I'm just going to avoid it. And that's what I do. This is why I'm sharing this with you guys. You know, this is something that I have struggled with. And so understanding the intention is very important here. The energy that the boundary is coming from is important. And like Julie said and Natalie said, go in to feel it. If it feels
Mhm.
tight, if it feels constrictive and it doesn't feel good, it's coming from the ego. And it's okay. It's okay that it's doing that. So what do? I believe, in my opinion, we would step away. We would step away and there's no need to create a boundary right now. Not right now. Go back in and remember. Go back in, breathe. Breathe into the
Right. And
constriction.
sorry, go ahead if you weren't finished.
Just saying
Um,
breathe.
yeah. So this is also reminding me, at the beginning of setting boundaries, it can be challenging to decipher, though, because I'm going back to, I really only started setting boundaries when I had my first son, so like 13 years ago. I was very much a people pleaser, um, and didn't really know how to set boundaries. It didn't feel comfortable for me. Saying no to people felt very uncomfortable to me. So, in that situation, if I were to try to feel it out, I would be feeling uncomfortable. So, with this, I guess what I'm trying to say is it comes with experience and time. And as you said, Angie, going back to the intention of it is really important, because it can feel super uncomfortable at the beginning to set boundaries with other people, or even with our children. If they're going to have a complete meltdown because we are now deciding to set a healthy boundary, that's not going to feel super great and loving and like, whoo, this is wonderful. But again, going back to the intention of it is extremely helpful, and looking at it in a longer term rather than just the short immediate term, how this experience feels is important. So for example, Angie, as you were saying about setting the 1 hour time limit before bedtime, I do the same. How does that feel in the long run? And you were explaining it feels much better. They have their time to play. They are able to settle down better for bed, and so on and so forth. Now, the first time you set that boundary, it probably didn't feel like that exact experience, right? So, when it comes to feeling it out and our intentions, remember to look at the big picture and a little bit longer term rather than just the immediate right now. Oh, this doesn't feel good, so I'm not going to set this
I'm going
boundary.
to
That's my
shut it.
ego. Yeah. So, and then again, the intention of it. What's the intention behind it? Am I just trying to control this because it makes me feel yucky, because I don't like it? Or am I doing this in a loving way because I believe that this is going to be helpful for everybody, and it is going to benefit us in the long run? So when I was talking about that, and I was saying, I just started setting healthy boundaries when my son was born, that was with other people, not with my son. I mean, he was a newborn. I didn't need boundaries with him. I just wanted him all the time.
Yeah, just pure
But
love.
exactly. But telling other people no, that was super uncomfortable at first. But my intention behind that was to be the best mother that I could be. So I realized if I was depleting myself by giving to others what I didn't have to give, I then could not be the best mother that I could be to my son, because I did not have that energy left over. So even if people were getting upset at me or calling me selfish or whatever they wanted to do, because I was no longer just giving to them endlessly, I had to take those crappy feelings, because it did feel crappy, to hear that or to feel that. But I had to remember I was doing this out of love for myself. That was my intention, love for my child. And even though it didn't feel great in that moment, it really felt great after, to not have to hold myself to other people's expectations,
Yeah.
because I had that freedom to just be now.
And we focus on the gift. We focus on the gift of it. That's one of the ways that helps us get through it too, right? it wasn't comfortable when we first did this because we had to get off our electronics too, and we didn't like that either, right? But the gift in it was we ended up playing games
Yes.
before bed. We ended up doing things connected together. We would laugh, we would, and it would feel really great. And before you knew it, like the girls, when I say, okay, in 5 minutes, phones are going to be done, right? Electronics are going to be done. And then they're already immediately like sometimes they just drop them right there and they say, okay, what can we play? Will you play with us? And they're excited and they've forgotten
Yes.
about how they didn't like that I was going to do this. And I've
Right,
forgotten it
right.
too.
Exactly. Change can be uncomfortable, very often. So, I mean, it's the same with our children when we're
Yeah.
changing something. It'll be uncomfortable for them and there will be pushback. But then suddenly it can completely turn around when it is the intention of love, when it is, a healthy boundary that is beneficial to everyone. It's the
Yeah.
same with my children. you know there was definitely pushback when this started, and every time, like I said, it's ebb and flow and things are constantly shifting and changing in every day. So I
Yeah.
mean, when Steve had a heart attack and had his surgery and then my blood pressure and then my kidney stone surgery, all of this, I wasn't there setting those limits, and I was allowing them to be on more than off because I
Yeah.
needed time to rest and all of that. And it would pop into my head like maybe I should get them off, and then it was like, you know what, just rest. Just take care of yourself. So after a while I said, okay, it's been a long time of limitlessness, and something that, like I said, we've discussed is their behavior. When their behavior starts to change, when they don't want to take care of their responsibilities, when they're bickering back and forth, forgetting how to be respectful. And actually, my son said to me, well, we've been dropping our games and helping out anytime you ask, and we're not bickering back and forth, and we're being respectful. I'm like, and you know what, you're right, you're right, you've been doing amazing, I've been really proud of you, and it hasn't been overtaking you the way it has in the past. Although there are still healthy limits and boundaries to the electronics, because it is not good for our brain and our mental health and our well-being to constantly be receiving information. Like I said, we need the downtime. We need to be able to express ourselves. We need to be able to feel. We need to be able to perceive what's in our environment. We need to make choices about how we want to act and behave. And it took, quite a few conversations before he was really grasping that, because, previously I'd always said, I noticed you guys are bickering. It's time to shut it down. And we have had a lot of conversations too about the amount of input and information we have in our brains. We need to balance that out with the output and the just being. So he did understand after a little while, but I limited it right down to 1 hour after school. And I mean, there's a lot of media and information in school too. So I think that is plenty because they're there for 6 hours with so much going on. And then on the weekend, I gave them 6 hours, but I gave them 2 in the morning that can't start till 10. So 10 to 12, and then they're off till about 3:30, and then they can go on for another 2 hours till about dinner time, 5:30, and then they can even have another 2 hours after that. And then I also like it shut down about an hour before bed, because bedtime can be much more efficient, and we have that time to communicate with one another as well.
Yeah, and I
So
think that's
I
the
don't know.
invitation. The invitation here is for people to explore what matters to them in their family, what matters, you know what I mean? Where is it, where do you feel that there needs to be space, time and space that you need to create for beingness? Because that's what we're teaching our children in conscious parenting. We're teaching them to be, right? And that's where we're guiding them, I believe. Not in this 3D sort of way. It's like we're not guiding them, we're guiding them spiritually. The world isn't guiding them spiritually. Right? So I think consciously we're that's where we're trying to guide them. And so what are those boundaries for you, in your family? And you've given us a great example of where you've seen setting it, but I can feel the intention that you have. The intention is this loving space and not to just take away from them, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And there's been many times where I've just taken away and been like, ooh, was that that wasn't so comfortable. I don't know if
I
that
do
was out of
that.
love. I think that was pretty controlling.
I do that. I absolutely do that.
Oh,
And
what
my
was that? Sorry, you
children,
froze on me.
oh, sorry. I do that. I do the same. And like I do the same of ego boundary cutting things and taking it away and questioning it after, and my children are really great. And this is something I've cultivated and I'm proud of that I've cultivated open communication with them. And so they are really great at calling me out on it. They're really great at keeping me in my
Yeah.
integrity. And just like you gave the example
Mm.
of them saying, like, we've been doing this, but they gave you the opportunity to say yes. And, you know, and I
Yeah.
also want to make sure you have space to feel feelings, to allow the feelings to rise up because they suppress them through the day too while they're at
Mhm.
school. They suppress some of the feelings,
Yes.
and so it's really important to have processing time. So if they're coming straight home, distracting, 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 and then going to bed, there's no time to process. And so I see the value in that.
Yeah, that's
But
a great point that you brought up. They bring in a lot from school.
yes.
Like I remember when they started going back to public school, and I would say to you, they come with so much energy. So we would do energy cleansing and everything when they came in. And now all they really need is a good hour to kind of decompress, to take care of the responsibilities like their backpacks. And a lot of the time, then they'll go outside, they'll play basketball and do this and that. But if they go directly onto their electronics, it's a completely different situation
Mhm.
in the household and completely different behavior. And a lot of the time they'll get so caught up playing and having fun and doing whatever that they won't go on their electronics right away. Or sometimes they're like counting down the seconds, like, okay, is it time yet? Is it time yet?
Yeah,
But
my
then
kids do
only
that.
giving them only giving them that hour, then they have that time, and then again they can go and just be and figure it out and be bored, like they like to
Yeah.
say.
Yes, because out of boredom comes
So
creativity.
yeah,
Out of boredom comes inspiration.
yeah,
And so give them an opportunity.
yes,
So, yeah, I think this is such a great conversation.
absolutely.
And I think we could, oh, my
Me
internet
too.
connection's unstable. Okay. Um, yeah, and my invitation to people is to really explore how you can bring what is a loving boundary for you? How explore that. Some of you might even be new to the concept,
Yes.
to the idea of creating a loving boundary. And so explore where you want to have boundaries in your household and explore if it's coming from ego and fear and control, wanting to control your household versus coming from wanting to allow your children space, create space for your children to feel. And
Mhm.
not just your children, your partner too, whoever's in the house, yourself. We create boundaries
Absolutely.
for ourselves too.
And
Yeah.
to that, I'd just like to add, we are the example. So that's a perfect place to start with ourselves. And as we learn how to set and maintain healthy boundaries for ourselves, we are then the example for our children and for our partners to do the same. Like we said, we cannot change anyone around us, what they're going to do. We can only change our own actions. So once we start changing the way we behave and act in the world, we will notice that within others around us as well.
Yeah.
We've said many times before, the people don't really have a choice but to change. We're not changing them, we're changing ourselves, but then
Yes. And they
their
respond to the
behaviors
energy. Yeah,
exactly will change. But it starts with ourselves, not controlling others.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. Natalie, thank you for your input. I hope you're able to join us for the next one. But that was episode 34. And please, if you like this video, I know that so many parents are like want to understand this in new perspectives, boundaries, right? So please share the video, like and subscribe. This helps us grow and share your own story, share your own experiences with boundaries and challenges and wins and, these beautiful ways that you are able to weave love into your household, right? And this is
Oh,
one of
you
those
froze
ways.
on me, Angie.
Oh no.
The last I heard was share your own experiences and challenges.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, share your own experiences and challenges and share share your wins. That's what I was going to say. Oh, and anyway, if you liked this video, yes, please share it with others. And we're live with our videos every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah, please join us live and subscribe. And if you want to find out more about Natalie, Julie, or myself, you can check the information in the description box below. But we love you. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for being here, contributing your energy. Thank you. Oh.
Love you. Bye.